are overwhelming and what is going on. I'm not sure if you can all hear me, so if not, Heidi, let me know. All right, so let's get started. A little bit about me. My name's Suzanne Pereira. I have over 13 years of experience working in information security. Of those 13 years, over 10 of them have been working from home or remotely. A couple of years I did get an office outside of my house. And with that, in the 13 plus years, that has been made up of being the director of operations, operations manager, a project manager, business consultant, and currently I own my own business and doing all of the above for different clients. Another thing I like to put in my presentation is that I'm also a mother, daughter, sister, and a friend. And the reason I do that is because I think that understanding how complex working from home is also understanding everything about what makes up you. So these are my two daughters, and as they would say, that is my son, Simba. And usually when I give a talk, I tell them I bring them with by putting them in the presentation. But since we're all virtual today, appreciate you spending your Saturday with me. And so they're here too. All right. So why this talk? Why is this talk important to us? I think that if you're like me, and a lot of this stuff I'm going to talk about is because I personally have gone through it. When you first find out you're working from home, whether it was pre-2020 or 2020, you think it's exciting. Who doesn't want to wear their pajamas? Who doesn't want to roll out of bed, turn their computer on, and have to not travel? So they thought of it as exciting, and it soon becomes overwhelming, and you start getting pulled in many different directions. So whether that's by your family, your friends, your work, and other obligations, you start, as Seinfeld says, your worlds start colliding, and you start to be overwhelmed and not know which way to go. Plus all the notifications we now have, that adds to it. I didn't know when I started working from home that sometimes I would be taking a phone call in my bathroom, in the shower, because it's the furthest point away from my kids or the noise that's going on outside. I never imagined it would be like that, but some days it's like that. So that's why we're going to talk about it. All right, so an overview of how this talk is going to go. We're going to talk about home. We're going to talk about work. We're going to talk about notifications. And then we're going to talk about how we're going to put some boundaries and expectations around those so that we can have balance in our life and hopefully start contributing to you feeling healthier and less overwhelmed every day. All right, and I'm sorry if I'm talking really fast. I'm usually working off the audience, but since I can't see you, I know you're there. So I hope I'm talking a little slower. All right, so let's start by setting some home and remote office expectations. First, we need to separate work from home. Again, pre-2020, it was a little easier to talk about, but if you just started remote working in 2020, it might be harder, especially if you have a studio, and even if you worked at home before that. I think that it's really important to separate it so that you know when you leave work and you're at home, even if you're in the same area. If you are capable, I would get an office, or even if you have to use your bedroom so that you have a door between you and anyone else that might live in your house with you, whether it's family or roommates. And then also, if you have a studio and you work from your kitchen table, I suggest you do your work at your table, and then as much as it's going to be annoying and takes time and effort, I would pack it up every day and then move it out of the way. That way you don't dread going back to your kitchen table. And also, if you see your work, you're always going to think about it, and you're always going to be like, oh, that's only going to take 5 minutes. So you're going to end up eating all your meals and doing work too because you think it's there. Why not do it? So separating that out will really help you, and it will help give you a nice balance there. Also, you need to set work times. Now, I know in this industry, working 9 to 5 is not realistic in most of our worlds, but I'm going to use that as an example throughout this presentation, just so you can understand more what I'm saying. But if you have a start time and you have a finish time, it's going to help set expectations with yourself and your family and friends and your colleagues of when they can reach you. So if it is, let's say that you want to hang out, your kids want you to do something at 6 o'clock, you know you can make it at 6. But if they don't know your work hours, then they might want to come in earlier, but at least you'll be present when you are off work at 6 o'clock. The other thing that we do, because we work from home, most of us, is we'll do chores or we'll do things around the house. I suggest keeping that until the weekend or off hours. Not that they're fun and exciting things that you want to do, but I also know that that adds to a long work day too. So if you don't give yourself a break, unless you find washing dishes or clothes or vacuuming relaxing, I would say put those off at the end. That way your day doesn't seem like nonstop work and you're giving yourself some breaks. Another thing we should do is make sure that if you come back after work, say you work 9 to 5 and you come back to work at like 8 or 9 p.m. to do research or to look up the next tool or work on a new skill set, you need to make sure that in your mind, you're realizing the difference between required and what you're doing for your own personal growth. It's also good to talk to your family and your friends about that this isn't required, so that you know that you're not working 14-hour days because you're forced to. Now, some of you are kind of forced to do that, which it's pushed upon you. That is work, and you can label it as such. But if you're doing it for yourself and for personal growth, make sure you're really calling that out so you don't get exhausted from working all the time. And you know that if you are becoming run down and burned out, that you can take those after hours away because that was just for your personal growth. Some other expectations to set, again, with your family and friends and yourself, because that's with the hours, that's with, I'm going to be a downer here. People, we can all agree to disagree, but in my pre-2020, I would suggest not going to all those lunches and coffees and friends outings during the workday. Because if you do that all the time, you're going to, if you have a 9 to 5, if you work 9 to 5 and you go meet your friends for lunch, say a couple times a week, we in this industry are pretty bad with keeping time. So you might think it only takes an hour, but you didn't plan for the traffic and you didn't plan for the wait at the restaurant. Not to mention you want to actually talk to the people that you're meeting. And then you have to you have to pay the check and sit in traffic and come back. So that can take about 2 to 3 hours, not the hour you slated it for. So that means your workday, instead of 9 to 5, goes 9 to 8 p.m. And usually you have dinner and other obligations between those later hours. So then you're going to end up working like 9 to like 11 because you got to stop again. Now, I'm not saying you don't have to do it, but I'm saying that if you do it, I would make it the exception to the rule so that you're working smaller days. Because what we do is if we don't set that expectation early, our family and friends might get used to us going out to eat, but then they're mad that you're not being present at night when they're there, but that's because you went to lunch with them. Now, if you enjoy those lunches and that's important to you, then you should keep doing it. Just know to let yourself know and everyone around you know that your work day is extended by your choice because you enjoy doing the things in the middle of the afternoon. Also, another thing, and it's kind of ridiculous to say, but if someone asks you to babysit or do something during the day, I definitely would say no. A lot of times people think when you work from home, 2020 has given people a different perspective on working from home, but a lot of times people think that when we work from home, we're not really working. So if you do take on that added extra work of watching someone, you're not really going to be working. You're just going to be making up all that time when the kids or whoever's over leaves your house. So I suggest not doing it or making it very limited when you are doing it, just so you can enjoy your free time and you can get off of work on time. And then that way, this is just to show you so you can be present in the moment, you can enjoy the moment, and you don't have work in the back of your head, be in the back of your mind because you did it during the time you said you were. And also that way your coworkers know your scheduled hours too. All right, now let's talk about work expectations that you can have inside your own company. It's good to be part of the team. And then again, I wrote this talk for pre-2020. So what I would say is you have to have a video conference and a call. You want to keep in touch with your team as much as possible, meaning like once or twice a week, a check-in. You want to have that video call on Monday. If you don't have a lot of video calls, have it on Monday. Talk about your goals for the week. Talk about what everyone's doing, because some people don't like video calls, but when they're on the call, especially if you don't have them very much, they like hearing what other people are doing and they learn stuff from those calls. Also, be sure to call on the people that are quiet because they like to speak up too, but they're shy. So call on them. Make sure you're always reaching out to people if you need it. That way they know you're still there, because no one knows if you're overloaded with work since we're all working remote. So you have to speak up and be your own advocate for that. On the flip side, for 2020, we have a lot of people that like Zoom calls now or video calls, and it's just calls. On that side of things, if you have to deal with that kind of schedule, I would start asking for agendas for those calls. And I know some of you might be intimidated for doing that, but I think you should, because it also sets the expectations that you have stuff to do and you need to be efficient on the phone call. So you don't want to be joining a phone call to come up with a schedule for their phone call. You want there to be an outline of what you want to accomplish within that phone call so you can do it and you can keep moving forward. Also take mental breaks, right? Like I said, if you enjoy washing the dishes or doing your laundry or vacuum, you should do that on your break during the day. But when we're home all day, it's sometimes we eat lunch or anything like that at our desk, and that's not good for us. Make sure you're getting up and you're walking, you're laying down and taking a nap if you need to, meditate, watch a show, but give yourself at least 10 to 30 minutes to give yourself to walk away from your desk and do something besides work, and shut those notifications off too, so you can have those moments to yourself. And then I'm just going to put all of these up here for now for you all to see, because they're basically the same thing. Earn time. You need to take it off. And what I mean by that is actually unplug. Don't, and I'm going to keep saying, pre-2020, when we were allowed to go places and do stuff, many people who work from home take it with you. Don't do that, because you earned it for a reason, and for you to be the best version of yourself for you personally and for your team, you need to unplug and get away. So shut off those comm channels, Go do a hobby, set the boundaries with yourself and your team so that you get that all done. And here's another thing. If you're afraid your company is going to implode while you are gone, they have a bigger issue, and that's a single point of failure. And I'm not saying that you're replaceable and you should be replaceable, but they need to think bigger in case one day you do leave, and they need to start working on that now. So do yourself a favor, use that time off and enjoy it. Now, what I also suggest you don't do is, all of us are pretty guilty of when we have an appointment, or say you have a long lunch that you know about, we all think we'll make it up. And so instead of using our personal time, we are like, we'll bank that and go somewhere, which we never do. Use it during that time so that your team and your coworkers are not reaching out to you during that time with your friends or family, or when you're at the doctor. You don't want to keep getting messaged, but if they expect you to be at work because you didn't take it off, they're going to keep messaging you. So use that time and don't be afraid. It's good for your health. So the benefits of unplugging is you reboot your brain. It's proven you'll reboot your brain because you're disconnecting, your creativity returns, and you're happier. It's also shown that if you're working on a project for, say, a couple days, weeks, even hours, and you're not getting it and you're not sleeping, but you just keep trying at it, it's shown that if you take time off and, say, go rock climbing, and you do something totally different than what you're doing right now, especially the work, the answer will come to you when you're not even in the zone of what you're working on. It's because you allowed your brain a break. So give yourself a break and go enjoy other things so that you can continue to be productive. Some other work boundaries and expectations to set is use your no. No is a very scary word. Some people are intimidated by using the word no, but use it because you are your best advocate. Again, no one's at home with you. No one can see what you're doing. No one can see all those other requests coming in. So you need to speak up and say no. Another good reason about saying no is not because you'll look bad. It also helps you. Because if you say no at the beginning and you say, no, I'm overwhelmed, I have other projects, I can't do it, it looks way better for you. And it's because then when you get down the road and you don't turn it in and you miss a deadline, they'll be more upset with you then because you didn't tell them at the beginning. And sometimes we do tell them at the beginning that we have a lot of stuff to do, but we don't use no. So make sure you're always using your no when you don't have time, when you can't fit it in and you can't meet expectations. Also, have a no call time or message. Now that also might seem like, if you're on a project where you say you're doing pen testing and you have a client that might have an emergency, then you will answer those phone calls. You're required to answer those phone calls. But I think talking with your team and letting them know, this is my hour, these are my hours, 9 to 5. I will always be reliable between 9 and 5, but I will not answer any notifications or emails outside of 5. If it is an emergency, please call me. I will answer if you call. And then if people start calling you with non-emergencies, then you have that call again that you only call with emergencies or I won't be answering the phone call. But setting that expectations that if I happen to look at the phone, I will, but I'm not going to look at the phone to see work stuff between 5 p.m. and the next morning. Which brings us to overload through communication channels and notifications. All right, there was a survey done, and it said on average, an employee was spending 209 minutes checking their work email and then 143 minutes checking their personal email. That's on average. So that is 352 minutes each day, which is 5 hours and 52 minutes. So that's just, we're just going to go over some of these statistics just so you can start understanding too where your time might be going and why it is, on top of all the other stuff, why you might be feeling overwhelmed working from home. So then there was also a mobile study done in 2008, which said that on average, Americans look at their phone 52 times a day. I was looking that up again yesterday, and another survey study said 96. I stuck with the 52 just to keep it on the average, and I didn't have time to look at the 96. But I know personally, I look at my phone more than that, and a lot more people in technology and in our industry look at their phone more than that, but we'll just stick with 52. And so if you break that 52 times up, and you pretend you got let's pretend we all get 8 hours of sleep at night and we're awake for 16 hours. That means we're looking at our phone about 3.25 times a day. I mean, per hour, which isn't bad. Like, I was like, oh, that's not bad. But then let's put it into your 8-hour workday. It means you're disrupting and looking at your phone about 26 times per day. 26 times you take away from your to-do list and your priority list to look at your phone. Now, that might include some of that email time, but it might not. So let's, again, look at our 8-hour workday. Let's pretend you're checking your emails for 5 hours and 52 minutes a day. That leaves you about 2 hours and 8 minutes that remain in your day. You check your phone about 26 times a day, in whether that's after the 2 hours and 8 minutes or if that's part of that. Let's pretend it's part of it, so you still have 2 hours and 8 minutes. Now, what about those phone calls? Where do those go? So you're going to take at least another half hour out of your, we're just pretending we have half hour only phone calls. That would be nice, but let's pretend you have a half hour phone call. And now you only have roughly like 1 hour and 40 minutes left to do your whole to-do list for the day. So how do you fit 8 hours into less than 2 hours? What do most of us do? This is where we become burned down and overworked. We're working longer. All those distractions, and we're working longer, which makes us feel guilt and torn different directions because we know we didn't do the list we were supposed to do, but we were not understanding where all our time is going. And then let's look at all of this fun stuff. These are our notifications. This isn't even all of the notifications you can be a part of. This is just some of them. If you made a list of everything that you had notifications for, whether it was on your phone, your email, or your computer, I bet you would be amazed by the amount of things you belong to. And because of all of this, we're never getting a break because we're not setting the right boundaries and the right expectations of, so we can have a healthy amount. And why is that? Most of us don't realize it, but we belong to those notifications because we have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. And I'll just paraphrase this a little bit, but it's the desire to stay continually connected to see what others are doing, because you're afraid that you're going to miss out on an opportunity, or you're going to miss out on an investment, and you're going to miss out on something that you need to know. So that FOMO is causing you to over commit to all of these notifications. And a lot of us belong to stuff because whether it's a private group or it's a podcast or it's the 80 Slacks that you might belong to, it's you're afraid that there's a tool or there's gonna be a vulnerability or there's gonna be something dropped and you're going to miss it. So we belong to all of this stuff. And yet most of the time when you belong to all of that stuff, you start actually ignoring the important stuff because it's just too much. And then what are some of the common fears and why we belong to all of that stuff, is you're afraid of letting your team down. That's mostly why you belong to all the communication channels, the signals, the Slacks, the Teams, anywhere that your team can get a hold of you. That's why you constantly have the notifications on and you're checking it, because you don't want to let your team down. And like I said, you belong to the podcasts and the articles and the blogs and all of that stuff, and Twitter. You belong to that stuff because you don't want to be left behind technically. So you want to make sure you're trying to absorb all of it as it comes out, but you can't. But we still try. You also belong to the stuff like number one, because you're afraid that people won't think you're reliable. And you are reliable. You're more reliable if you whittle it down to say like a text message or a signal message. That way they know how to get a hold of you than being across all the boards. And one that a lot of us don't like to admit, but is that you belong to so much because you don't want to become irrelevant. It's also why we're afraid to take vacations, because you don't want to be replaced. And we think that, so we keep on going at the speed we're going, and we never take time to ourselves. So then with the fear, our fear leads to pressure, being stressed, we're not taking breaks. It also leads, again, to being on communication channels 24/7, no time off, no personal life. So then you start to begin the cycle of what's the point of working? I'm not taking off. I'm not enjoying it. People just want me all the time. They ping me all the time. They don't give me my space, which is why we need to set those boundaries and those expectations for ourselves. And then the negative impacts of it, again, are your health. You start putting your health off. You're not going out. You're not getting sunshine. You're not going to the doctor's office. You might become depressed, and those aren't good things to do. You'll be burned out. Your relationships start to hurt because you're not making time for those people that are important around you. Your creativity starts lacking because you're just so buried underneath all the stuff you've signed up for. And the one that hurts most that I've suffered from is my motivation. The more things that are coming at me, the less motivated I am to do them. And so that really is just a vicious cycle that just keeps going around until you understand why and what you can do for that. And then again, what can we do? So what are the steps we can make this better? And like we've been saying, you need to acknowledge it. You need to understand your fears. It's a scary word too, but like, it doesn't mean you're weak. It actually is a strong thing to understand the fears and what things drive you. So once you understand those, and then you start creating new habits around them, and then you set the boundaries, you're helping yourself to dig out of where you're at. And I'm just going to put all of these up there. For work communication channels, look at them all and say, are they required? Especially if things, if your company just started adding like all different channels at once, and now people message you all over, have a sit down and a talk with them and see if they're all required. If they're not required, then like have that talk with them and say, I'm only checking these channels. And do you need to check them all day? Do you there's certain channels that might be just a water cooler room. Only check that once a week or once a day, but like you don't have to check them all the time. And then again, set your work boundaries, set your personal boundaries, set the emergency boundaries so that you can have that time off and people know how to get a hold of you, and then shut off your notifications. Social media. This one's harder. I think that if you guys made a list of everything you belong to, like I said, you'll be surprised by it. But I would also challenge you to figure out what the purpose of those, why you belong to those, understanding why you belong to them. And then after you understand why you belong to them, ask yourself how often you actually need to check them. Do you only have to check them daily? Should you check them weekly? Like what is a good amount of time that won't be overwhelming to you, and that fear isn't driving you to check them so much? So just really understanding why you belong to them. And hey, some of them you could probably stop unfollowing. And then just setting that boundaries with yourself and sticking to them so that you don't fill all your free time looking at all of your notifications. And acknowledging it will help you. It will help you set the boundaries. It will help you recognize your fears, be happier and healthier, and not burn out. Burnout is a real thing, and you don't want to get there. So just start working to set your boundaries and expectations to make it easier on you. It's not easy. It takes work, but the end result is a good one. Now, I usually end with this slide. Boundaries and expectations help lead to balance. Balance helps lead us to being less overwhelmed and lonely, which I really believe is true, and I believe you'll understand that too as you place the boundaries. But because of where we're at in 2020, I wanted to put one more slide in here because I've had some questions. My 2020 suggestions and thoughts are, what I hear a lot is it's okay if someone's not doing as much as they used to, or they're having a hard time, it's okay, we're all there and give them some time, which is true. But I also think right now we're how many months in, I think, and yes, there's a bunch of things that keep coming and it's making 2020 harder, but I think what we need to eventually ask ourselves is, are you happy with your work performance? And then are you happy with your work/home office? And then would you be content at where you're at a year from now? So right now, if I'm struggling and I'm feeling like I'm at 50% of what I normally am, will I be happy with that in a year? And if the answer is no, then I think you start working on trying to tweak things here and there. It doesn't mean you're going to be at 100% where you were before, but it means you're working to be happier. You're not just settling for being where you're at. So for me, it might be waking up, you shower, you eat your breakfast, and you work. It's just developing a routine. Another thing that I've noticed, like it might go week to week and I have to tweak something. So some days I get up at 6 and I work, and that works great. And then the next week, that's not working so great. So I tweak it to work a different way. I just have to constantly find something that's driving me and where I'm pulling my motivation from. And that's what's working for me now. And I just keep doing that. So I keep finding some kind of drive and desire to keep doing what I enjoy. And then I always make goals for the week. And I do that so that you can see it on Monday what your goal is. And then always check at the end of the day where you're tracking for your goals. And if you make a to-do list and there was something on your to-do list that you did, write it down and cross it off just so that you can see that you are making progress and you're not just standing still. Very important so that you keep feeling positive and you know you're moving forward when it doesn't feel like it. Sometimes, especially this year, you're like in quicksand and it doesn't feel like we're moving, but you are. So just keep tracking that so you can see what you're doing and that you are meeting the goals that you have set out for the week. And make them realistic goals, not something that you hope will happen, something you know you can make happen when you put your mind to it. And with that, we can't really take questions, but I'll be in Discord after this. And here is my information. And I know I talked faster than I normally do, but I really appreciate you all attending. And I hope you enjoyed my talk. Thank you very much.